This is Theater in Middletown. This is Betty Hinshaw, and I have traveled to Fayetteville, Arkansas to interview Dr. George R. Kernodle. We are sitting in Dr. Kernodle's office and den at his home, 420 Rebecca Street. Dr. Kernodle is Professor Emeritus of the University of Arkansas, and at one time in the early part of his career, he taught at Ball State Teachers College, as it was known then. George, since we are particularly interested in talking about theater in Muncie and Delaware County in the 1930s, first of all, would you tell us, when did you come to Ball State?
I got to Ball State in 1930, and I figured out I was part of an expanding work in the whole Midwest was expanding several of its specialty departments. So the drama was one of the ones that wanted expanded. They hadn't done only a minimum of drama work before. But in 1930, they brought me down, and in the next few years expanded in other directions too. But they wanted a director of course, in the English department, but to direct plays and work with debate, I had to do just an enormous number of jobs. We're amazed now at our age of specialization, that how many times we were not so specialized. I came there in 1930. Miss Mary Pavey, who was the head of the English department then, brought me down. And I was just finishing a master's at the University of Chicago. And she brought me down to begin some more concentrated drama work. Of course, there had been some English teachers and others had done some work before that. But they wanted a concentrated person to take charge of the drama work. And that was me.
And you were there at Ball State for how long?
I was there 2 years.
2 years.
And I guess one summer.
Yes. Can you tell us some of the productions that you directed while you were at Ball State?
Well, now, I hadn't made myself a list on that.
I didn't prepare you for
that. Fairly early, I did Romeo and Juliet, and they had done some Shakespeare there, but hadn't been willing to let teachers have time enough.
As I remember, Romeo and Juliet is one of your favorite productions. You've directed it a number of times.
I've directed it 4 times, and I still like it.
You still? Mm-hmm.
But we kept the boards busy. Yeah, we did about a play a month, on top of coaching debate and 2 or 3 other activities.
That must have kept you busy. A play a month?
Yeah, almost.
That's remarkable.
It would run not over 6 weeks. So that we were doing quite a range, and there was a job hunting up. Some of those productions were a group of 1 acts. Of course, if you're dealing with any number of people, and particularly beginning people, you're bound to use a 1 act play. And occasionally, you do something that's very exciting to the drama director. You find a person who had seemed very shy and timid in everyday life, and there I ran into I don't know what made her choose to take a course in dramatic production, but a girl named Charity Eva Williams.
Yes, I remember her.
Do you? Well, she was a shy little mouse who stayed over in the corner, and I don't know how she got nerve enough to come into that class, but she had no sooner started on a long speech, on a speech with some substance in it, she turned loose a power nobody would have suspected. So I said immediately, I'll use that 1 act play. And we did, and she made a very strong impression in that short. I think we put that on the television. And also, then we chose a play for her called Sunrise. And she went to town on that. She, let's see, where are we?
Sunrise.
Yes, and Sunrise was the, and the townspeople, a number of them were impressed, and a group of people from one church came over and said, look, we think that's a wholesome play, it's a good play, it's a strong play. We'd like to, they didn't say we'd like to make a little money out of it, but they wanted to do it and felt that they could find an audience that would come and they would be glad to get a little extra charity money. So we carried that over to a performance in the old Masonic Auditorium.
Oh.
Enormous place. But she had power enough to fill that room enough.
Is that that wasn't the original musical that you did then?
No.
That's something else you did at the Masonic Temple?
Yes. They had been, and I was not the first, there had been people who put on an annual musical just to make money.
Oh, yes.
And they usually used the Masonic Auditorium, though dramatically it was an awful old barn.
Yes, I remember. I performed in it.
Ball State was unfortunate in some ways. It had a whole series of badly designed theaters.
Very true. I always thought the one in Assembly Hall resembled a picture frame on the wall somehow.
But we tried putting on the play. It didn't quite come out with enough money. But we were excited and interested, the students.
Did the students write this musical?
Yes. It was a man who was very active in jazz groups and combos. And he was planning, and I said, why don't we just get together? And we did, and he wrote a good many of the lyrics and the verses. I pitched in and did a few myself. And it almost became a effective play. But it would have taken more experienced people and 10 more rehearsals.
Always 10 more rehearsals.
Always you need that. But it compared to what people were expecting.
Speaking of the Masonic Temple brings me to the subject of Muncie Civic Theatre. Now, if you came in 1930, this has to be the beginning of Muncie Civic Theatre. I saw your name in one of our anniversary programs as being a person who attended the first meeting when they were thinking of forming such a group. Can you tell us something about that meeting?
Well, that meeting was called by 2 or 3. We thought of them as society leaders, as people with some status and wealth. It was called to plan and consider, the fancy word since then would consider the feasibility. But they wanted opinion, and the man from the Minneapolis Little Theater group came up, and I think some Easterner they brought in, and they got a pretty good turnout, crowd of people. And they were talking about why, where, and how. And several of us, I was, actually when I was there, I was no older than some of the students.
That's true.
And we were palling together anyway. And soon realized that that was going to be only of marginal interest for the theater people in the college. But even that is worth a good deal. And different theater people, you need a town needs many different groups of people who can who keep the active interest.
And it's always good to have an exchange, too,
Oh, yes.
So that you have students who are working in the community theater and community people who are sometimes working in university or college theater.
Yes, but I think our students from the college were already realizing it would be an interesting place together to be cast and get in a play, which everybody wants to do that has any interest in drama. But they realized that it was not going to be done for them. So some of them were a little disgusted and hadn't visualized that a town really needs several theaters, a number of buildings, and has to march forward on different legs. So that we were glad to see that as a possibility. And hoping maybe they'd be interesting. It takes an enormous amount of work and effective people to get together and get a theater underway, because you can muster enough energy and get a lot of energy together to put on a play or two, but to keep it going and keep some continuity. The musicians have more of an agreement that they are going to work together on many occasions. And of course our church choirs we organize so that there's an institution. But it was just in the beginning then when the dramatics out of the college were getting underway with some professional help. That before I came there, it had to be done with school teachers that had no experience with drama, and not all of them even liked it.
Oh, I think that happens so often. People
They're
were
just
assigned.
You do the college, you do the class play,
Right.
and occasionally they plunged in and did a good job. But the community can't count on that.
No, that's very true. Well, we certainly appreciate this chance to talk with you. Again, this is Betty Hinshaw interviewing Dr. George R. Kernodle, and we are at his home, and the date is July 5th, 1985.
All right.
Thank you, George.
Not at all.
Conversation.
Well, yes, Emmons Auditorium, they bring, now big musicals, fine, on the artist series. They bring big musicals. But now, for instance, one time they brought Man in the Moon Miracles, 5-character play in that huge auditorium. It was lost. You cannot do intimate theater. Now, Ball State University Theater is a small theater that seats 400, a little over 400. But that's perfect, you see, for shows, and they can give them a number of nights. But if you're bringing one traveling company in here for one night, you can't put it in a 400-seat theater. You have to make money to bring them because the cost is so high.
Well, that's why some people predict that the theater cannot get any much better than it is now. And I don't agree with that at all. We don't ask the Methodists to go to the Baptist church on Sundays. Why should we ask the people for one play to go to another play that might be completely outsized? That they couldn't fit together on that. So it's a problem. And a few people have done a fairly good small theater. And a number of people are thinking they still want a theater not over 500. But one kind of play.
Civic Theater seats 500, 515, I think it is. How large are the regional theaters?
Most of them are open stages. And they try to hit the ideal of about 1,100.
About 1,100. The Guthrie Theater, for instance.
Yes. No, Guthrie Theater is larger than that.
It's larger.
Yes.
Now the Indiana Repertory Theater at Indianapolis has, 2 theaters plus a cabaret, but their main theater downstairs, I would think, seats in the neighborhood of 700 to 800 maybe.
That's a very nice size.
Yeah. And then they have an upper stage theater that seats only about 400.
Can they let the same show be heard
Well,
up
the
there?
upper stage they use more for experimental theater.
As a separate theater.
It's a separate theater. Yes, they have.
Well,
a
that's
separate.
useful to have. And we came up with the concept about 15 years ago that the little black box is an ideal. Because we are willing to do things without any scenery or any scenery that has any color or character of a particular place. And you see, it calls for a different kind of production. And most of the, we don't have a big public for that kind of thing. But the rebellious young people, they revel in that. They can like that enormously.
We call it studio theater.
Studio
we
theater
do
is
it.
one of our good words.
And it's a versatile kind of theater that you can do arena theater in. You can do proscenium if you want to. You can do theater.
Curiously
that's
enough,
open on three sides.
The places that have just an open platform theater very often build an inner proscenium. And of course you say that's very wasteful, but it isn't. Because you can make a fine distinction and put a show in the theater that seats 11, 12, 1300 and put around that some scenery designed for that particular play. And that's extravagant, but it's very good. And we seem to have an endless source of labor. We don't pay very much for theater labor. And we kind of argue, and there's some truth in it, that the students are willing to wait for nothing. And it's a shame for us to ask them to. But there are times when it's not necessarily a great discrimination. So that the ideal would be then 3, 4 different theaters. And you see both Lincoln Center tried to do that and had their smaller theater just much too big. So there was not a good guess on what that should be. But now Britain has done a beautiful job of putting 3 different sized theaters in its
National
Theater.
Yes, I've been in all 3 of those.
And then over at the new Rubicon Theater.
Barbican.
Excuse me, Bobby.
You're not crossing the Rubicon. It's the
Maybe I
Barbican.
should. The Barbican, you can make that a number of different sizes out here. I haven't been there since that was open.
I was in just one theater in the Barbican. Part of that was closed off when we were there. I know 2 of their restaurants were closed. We had a hard time all getting something to eat. But
well, that reminds you,
yeah.
we do want our theaters connected with places of pleasure.
Sure.
Now, in Shakespeare's time, that included a whole balcony of prostitutes. And we don't think we need to supply that demand in this country. We'll let them hunt them up for themselves.
We haven't gone that far.
That far.
Yeah.
But there are other kinds of pleasures that are not so.
We do have little bars connected with theaters.
Yes. Now, does the Barbican come from a place with a bar?
Oh, I have
Is that
no
what
idea.
the word means?
I have no idea where that came from.
I'll bet not.
Where that name came from. But the National Theater does have, well, as you say, all 3 sizes. And that I love the little theater downstairs. What's it called? Is it the?
Oh, the Cottesloe.
Oh yes.
They've thrown it out.
Right. I'd forgotten what they were doing when I was there, but it was. I remember all black. You just spoke of the black box. Made you think of that.
I heard that, but the one we went to see had a great deal of painted scenery.
Really.
And I thought it was ridiculous to try to ask that small theater. They were doing a kind of Dickensian study of small town. And they had posts, banisters, and indications of small town houses, too visible to suit my taste.
Really?
But you see, it's such an active and exciting art. It's trying all kinds of things. This theater we try to serve, so that we are glad when we have a little space and we have somebody trying a different thing. It's sometimes expensive, and the British are like Reagan, are wanting to cut down on what their arts cost.
The National Endowment for the Arts has been cut drastically. Right.
And I don't think Mr. Reagan is any substitute for an actor.
I agree. Can we say that on tape?
I haven't said anything objectionable
Easily.
at that point, do I?
Right. Well, of course, in Great Britain, they're subsidized.
Well, a good many of our theaters are subsidized. Far too small a subsidy.
But they're not subsidized by the government,
No.
as they are in England.
And I've heard people argue that you should keep the government out of the theater as you keep the churches out of theater business.
Mm-hmm.
And churches can't get along without a good deal of gift. You can't make out and even pay your staff if you have to collect every Sunday all you can spend that week. So churches are one thing we recognize a deep need in society. Well, not that I go to them.
But you believe that's
I approve of
a
them.
necessary element in our lives, right?
Mhm.
Well, do you think government should subsidize theater?
Yes.
I think it's the only answer.
And I think you see the dangers of having public subsidy from the federal government. We can mitigate those in many ways. And we scatter and we spread the resources so that I don't think we have any more protection than we really need to have some protection against groups that are so zealous.
Well, as long as we don't let the government dictate what we perform or produce.
Well, even that, they're bound to make some noise.
Do you ever ever stop?
No, what would you like to say? We're just talking. This isn't part of the interview. David turned it on. He said, as long as you're going to talk, you might as well
Recorded.
record some of this.
Well, come
Some
on
of
in the
George's.
other room. Yeah, there's one more thing I want to. They're going to leave tomorrow, George.